Well, if you're new to the channel, you might not remember the type of content I used to make. And if you've been around a while, I'm sorry, I haven't made it in a while. But there's an important issue that I think not just those that used to follow my account for a lot of the socio-political issues, as well as all the new people who are enjoying me ass blast gaming companies, there's something that all of us have in common. There's something that is bigger than all of us, and that is the censorious nature of the tech industry, specifically Patreon. A lot of my peers in the YouTube community make their living on Patreon. I was banned from Patreon a year ago during my crusade to root out pedos from the Magic the Gathering community. A successful crusade, but it cost me my Patreon. Now, it wasn't quote unquote that much money, but it was helpful for the channel. I then moved to something called Maker Support, which imploded after just a few months. And just days before announcing I wanted to move to Subscribestar, they became the target of far left attacks. Companies that work with Patreon work to protect what I believe is a virtual monopoly on funding content creators. And it's time the viewers, myself included, work together to make a difference. Now, I've had an idea of what creators can do in the interim. Until there is such a solution, I know Jordan B. Peterson and Dave Rubin have been talking about something, but people are leaving Patreon over this. Because what started it was Patreon banning my friend, Carl Benjamin, you might know him as Sargon of Akkad, over a conversation he had off-platform. A conversation that did not break terms of service. A conversation that Jack Conte, the CEO of Patreon, admitted in private messages to reporter Tim Pool. You may also know that another friend of mine, Marcus Meechan, you might know him as Count Dankula, friend of the channel, has had issues around his speech, cost him thousands of dollars, made him a marked man in his country for teaching his dog a trick. People's right to express themselves is extraordinarily important to me, not whether or not I agree or disagree with them, just their right to do so. And companies like Patreon have positioned themselves as a virtual requirement for most YouTube and off-YouTube content creators that create anything even mildly edgy. I'm going to ask that you consider sharing this video out because I'm sure it will not be monetized and not reach maximum notification levels on YouTube. I'm going to ask that even though it's kind of a serious topic, hopefully you'll stick it out and listen. The problem is that Patreon, while important, seems to contradict itself constantly in their banning of creators. They banned Carl Benjamin, one of their largest creators, for something he said off-platform while arguing with literal racists. Then Sam Harris, I believe one of the top 10 largest creators, a liberal, by the way, as far as I know, decided to close his Patreon account in solidarity with Carl Benjamin. I think the largest guy out there right now is probably Jordan B. Peterson, and I'm hoping he gets on board. I know that these folks are working together to build an alternative. The problem is it's complicated. It's complicated. There is many layers of censorious tech companies stacked on top of each other, which create this monopoly for Patreon. First, Patreon themselves, whom does not follow their own terms of service and selectively bans people whenever they see fit. See, they said that they take a hard line against hate speech, things like that, but you don't even have to dig. Here's an Antifa Patreon with 86 patrons. Here's another one, the Red Guards of Austin. Here's one creating VR prawn. I didn't even have to dig. I just Googled it. But you have a literal domestic terror group raising funding on Patreon. 86 patrons. Everything private. Now, to be clear, unless it's illegal, I don't have a problem with it. Patreon also says they disallow spicy male and female videos, if you know what I mean, but Patreon is also rife with it. So let's just say I'm asking you to look. If you don't believe me, you don't have to take my word for Jack Conte's lies, but the evidence is out there. It is selective, it is unpredictable, and it is damaging creators' abilities to make a living. I'm asking you to cancel your Patreon account. I know that this is going to hurt other creators, but I'm going to show you a really easy way, if you're a creator, to pop up an alternative, and that I think you should encourage your backers to also leave Patreon, because they're not going to change their ways. They've already doubled down, tripled down on their banning of Carl Sargon-Akkad and other people. By the way, this isn't just about them banning my friend. They have consistently banned people for no reason. No notice. Myself included. But yet they allow people whose politics they clearly agree with remain on their platform. So let's just agree that Jack Conte is a liar. We can also agree that Jack Conte can run his business any way he wants. Unfortunately, when you have Stripe, a payment processor, and even large credit card companies like MasterCard and PayPal themselves deplatforming people, like we saw with PayPal deplatforming Subscribestar, this problem is huge. We need big money. We need Papa Elon money to create an alternative that will withstand the nearly instantaneous deplatforming that happens. When Maker Support came, within a week of me promoting it, it was shut down, hit with chargebacks and all sorts of issues like that. Within a week of Subscribestar getting any real traction, these censorious tech companies like PayPal and Stripe and all these, Patreon, they're all working together, clearly. Work to deplatform Subscribestar. And I know they're working on an alternative. And if they do get something I truly believe in, I will support that. I will create one there. I'll even create one for exclusively games if they can survive. The problem is everyone sees how much of a need there is in the market. Creators on YouTube rely on alternative sources of income, whether it's merch or super chats or Patreon. Even some of the most edgy YouTube creators out there have Patreon accounts. They're not long for this world, I'm sure, but they do. And every time people try to move, the media is quick to point out that, oh, this person we said is alt-right is now on this new platform. Therefore, the platform supports these politics. Well, does Patreon support Antifa then? Because you allow them on your platform. No, of course not. That's not how reality works. But that's how the media pressures these platforms and pressures people like PayPal into deplatforming. And I know this is going to suck for a lot of the other content creators out there that rely on it, and they're just collateral damage. But what I did, and I don't even shill this, but for months, back in April, I just threw up a quick WordPress website. There's a free plugin where people can donate to you monthly. Or you can set amounts, or they can pick whatever month that is, just like Patreon, or they can do a one-time donation. I'm imploring my fellow content creators to do something similar. And you don't have to know any HTML code or anything like that. You could also create a link below your videos to allow people to subscribe via PayPal. And now I know the true black-pilled folks out there are going to say, well, PayPal does it too. Yeah, they do. But they're the best we've got right now. And we can't fight the battle on all fronts. Right now, I'd like to see Patreon see what fans of free speech can do by leaving their platform. And what will happen is people will leave their platform. And then some of their most trusted creators will complain to Patreon because they are innocent bystanders in this. But what a lot of people don't remember is when Patreon really blew up, it was because they provided a place for edgy content creators. It was primarily populated by creators that were affected by the adpocalypse. That's when guys like Sargon of Akkad and Bearing and a lot of the more edgy people out there moved to that platform because their videos weren't getting monetized. But now that Patreon has bled a certain percentage, 8% or whatever, off the top for them for a few years, now they're just tossing them aside. Well, every day you continue to use their platform, you're supporting this behavior. And maybe you agree with them banning Carl Benjamin. Maybe you agree with them banning certain people. But eventually they'll come for someone who did nothing wrong. And the longer we continue to use Patreon, the longer we support them as content creators and viewers of content, the longer they will continue to do this. I was supporting Count Dankula and a couple others on Patreon. I canceled my Patreon account today, and I'm going to support them in other ways. In fact, I hopped on the Count Dankula live stream earlier today, and I threw him $50. So now I don't feel bad about that. Covers me for a year. I think I was giving him $3 a month or something like that. Patreon must feel the burn of this, and we must not go back. Here's to hoping that other people will create a more robust system, a system that is more impenetrable from the far, far left political monopoly that is Patreon, Stripe, MasterCard. But it's not so easy, and I don't have a solution for it right now. But what I do have is a 5-minute option for any content creator to leave Patreon today and not lose a dime. In fact, they'll keep more of their money. In fact, even though I don't shill this, there's like 20 or 30 people that already do this for me. And you know what? It goes into stuff for the set. Goes into covering video games, better lighting, stuff like that. Yes, it's a little more difficult to have like member-only posts, but you can figure it out. It's not hard. And I'm sorry if you're a content creator caught up in all of this, and I'm sorry, Dank, and other people that I backed, but I just cannot use Patreon ever again. This has to be the end of them. And will they close tomorrow? No, of course not. But the less money they have means the less power they have. And as more people get out and they're not afraid, if you were making $1,000 a month and you set this up and you made $800, but you weren't giving PayPal 8%, okay, so you about broke even, and now you're not supporting a censorious platform. And it's much more difficult, by the way, to get deplatformed this way, because people can come in and donate one time only. They can do whatever. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's more difficult. And this is where we have to be right now, other than mailing cash, apparently, in some sort of underground network. This has to stop, but it starts with leaving Patreon. I hope you'll consider doing it.